Hello everybody, it's Tommy and welcome back to another Creative Sim for the Disney Save. Today we are finally going to be adding in the characters from Aladdin, and today's video is going to include Aladdin, Jasmine, Abu, Jafar, the Sultan, and Raja at the end. Now I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I kind of wanted to do today's video off the cuff a little bit, less scripted. We're not gonna get too much into like the personalities of these characters. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with these characters, and I'll be fully implementing lots of things and traits and those kinds of things to bring them to life the best that I possibly can in The Sims. But I just feel like there's so much to talk about with these guys and so many little details to the actual character creation process, so let's do something a little bit different today. I will mention, however, that I decided to give Jasmine one of the newer traits that we just got with The Sims 4 Lovestruck. Romantically Reserved is the name of the trait, and I kind of took this as, like, the game describes this a little bit different, but the reason I picked it is because I feel like she very much wants to find, not like a soulmate, but she wants like a really personal, real connection. And sort of like one of the things about her story is that obviously she has to meet a lot of suitors and she's constantly being put into the matchmaking process, and a lot of people in her life would very much like her to just take it and marry whoever and make a match based on what would be best for Agrabah, but she very much describes that that's kind of not what she wants from the beginning, and so she's a little bit romantically reserved. She doesn't want to get to know anybody super personally. She wants it to be organic, and I feel like you can kind of twist it in that sort of way. She will have Raja. He's going to be at the end of the video, like I mentioned, and I'll be explaining a little bit more in detail about his sim, because he's kind of tricky, I will definitely say. I am so over the moon about how everybody turned out in today's video. I think they are so all super recognizable. I was so nervous to do this one. I've been thinking about creating Jasmine in the save file for a very long time, specifically because of her hair. You all know for the Disney save I do not use custom content, and there are absolutely beautiful Maxis Match in particular versions of Jasmine's hairstyle that are just a must-have, like something I will immediately be using in the save file for me personally. But I have to make a version of her that isn't custom content, and I really didn't know which hairs I was going to be going with because she just has something so specific. Now I did find something that I was kind of happy with, and I think it's from high school years. It's kind of this like braided updo, and it gives a lot of the similar vibes, but there is a city living hair that I've had my eye on for a really long time that has a crown and jewel sort of jewelry piece going around the head that I always kind of thought I would use for Jasmine until we got this newer hair. So I brought a couple of those into her outfit choices as well. Now, in addition to her classic blue outfit that you would think of from the animated movie, Jasmine wears so many outfits across the course of her other films. If you didn't know, there's a couple of other Aladdin animated films. And then the live action in particular, I took a lot of inspiration from because the costuming in that film is just absolutely gorgeous. And I really wanted to draw in some more colors, pink, purple, gold, those sorts of vibes. So I gave her a ton of outfits. They're not all going to be featured in today's video, but she has a lot to choose from when you actually play with her in game. Now, something I do want to address with Jasmine in particular, but all of the characters in today's video, this sort of applies. Because I don't use custom content, I'm very limited in terms of what I actually have access to and the choices in game that I can pick from that make something culturally accurate. So that being said, a lot of what I've gone with here is going to be stuff from my wedding stories. I also picked up a couple of kits, and those are really helpful. Jungle Adventure, but primarily when it comes to the more formal looking outfits and Jasmine's top that you'll see in her lighter blue outfit every day is going to be from wedding stories, a little bit of For Rent as well. That being said, a lot of the clothing in particular from my wedding stories is very likely to be based on specifically more Indian culture. And although there is some debate over Jasmine and what she actually is, and I'm not here to like argue the intricacies of that debate at all. If you claim her, you claim her. I have no problems. I'm not trying to squash that whatsoever. I just wanted to acknowledge that it is widely believed that Agrabah is likely based on Baghdad, Iraq, and although the palace is kind of representative of a version of the Taj Mahal, she is more likely to be Arabic, and a lot of the storytelling, the actual story itself, some of the things and the wording and the songs, Jasmine's name itself, and other characters in the film kind of lean into the idea that she is probably an Arabic princess, and we just don't have a lot of clothing options, if really any at all, that I could properly pull from things that would be a little bit more culturally appropriate for her. But what we do have are some Indian designs and things that lean a little bit more into that culture. So I did kind of lean more that direction when dressing her and adding things in as choices for her, that being wedding stories, but then again a little bit of For Rent as well, where you're gonna get more of like that Asian influence. I'll be keeping an eye out for future packs and hopefully more. We are always like begging for more cultural representation in The Sims to update these characters and hopefully make them a little bit more appropriate to what they are supposed to be. But I just kind of wanted to acknowledge that because I feel like it's important, and I also don't want anybody to think that I'm trying to represent Jasmine as something that she is potentially not. It's just what's available in the game at this time, and I did a lot of research on Agrabah and the depictions of the costuming in the live action and also Broadway, and tried to do the best that I possibly could. But at the end of the day, it is like a fictional location, so it is in the movie even like sort of poorly represented as this blend and mix of cultures that are so distinct from one another, but unfortunately in the film have kind of been mashed into one. Regardless of that, I think she came out absolutely stunning. I'm so excited about her, and I feel like she has a really great resemblance facially to Jasmine, even regardless of not being able to add the hair and the super appropriate clothing. So I'm excited, and I was ultimately happy with the choices that I made in game from what was available. Now, Aladdin, much tougher, and I want to just say that I feel like he is one of those characters that kind of suffers from this slight changing of face between different versions of like what's available. So something that happens with Disney a lot is that they'll have like official artwork that is a little bit more rendered and detailed, and I believe that they will use these for merchandising purposes, and they're kind of like the poses and the things that you would think of iconically in your brain when it comes to these characters, because it's the ones that Disney uses over and over again, and it's like a refined version of this character. But sometimes what I've found with these images is that they are almost like changed slightly in shapes and colors from the film itself when you actually like go through and look at it. So I'm always a little bit torn about which one do I use, and I feel like for Aladdin, he suffered the most because when I looked at more rendered versions of his face and some of his like iconic artwork versus just stills from the movie, he just looked like kind of two different people. Like his nose was very drastically different between the two versions. His eyes are so big and animated, and I was really trying to catch that puppy dog innocence and kindness that he definitely has in his facial structure, and make him also extremely good looking at the same time, of course. So I really played with his face shape, his skin color, his eye shape in particular, because I just felt like no matter what I did, he didn't look quite right. And it's just ultimately that I feel like I had too many references that changed him here and there, and then I was trying to like mash him up and it didn't quite work together. So ultimately I landed on a version that's very good looking, and he does definitely resemble Aladdin. The hair is messy, a little bit longer, goes down the back of the neck, and for his everyday wear, I think you don't see it until maybe we get towards the end of the video today. I'm going to be inserting some clips as well of them in live mode if you'd like to stay tuned to the end. But if you follow me on TikTok, you would have already seen some of these clips because I've been kind of like sharing some things over there, so definitely check that out. He ultimately ends up with, I think it's a jungle adventure kind of undershirt, white button up with a purple and brown vest over the top of it. And obviously we would rather he just wears the vest, but in between like the kind of intricate, detailed, beautiful clothing that Jasmine and the Sultan and Jafar are wearing, and him being like at the palace, it didn't quite fit perfectly. Like you could go with one of those athletic purple undershirts that show a lot of the chest, but it's so modern looking and it didn't fit in with the theming of like the rest of the characters, and I really try to make everybody match. So I leaned a little bit more again into like the version that you see in the Aladdin live action in particular, where he wears more of like a layered look and he's not just chest out with a vest. He has a couple of different layers on. We are on to Abu, who is a cat, but he at its base has been recreated into a monkey. So there is a fellow creator, I'm sure many of you are very aware of this creator. Their name is theallegedsimmer, and I'll be linking them down below. Any YouTube things or Tumblr is like particularly where I tend to keep an eye on what they're working on. Twitter as well. They make the absolute most beautiful pets, in particular like exotic pets, and they will often take cats or dogs and recreate them into larger cats or dogs like lions and tigers. And then some of the horses, they've been doing some really cool things with that, making reindeer. And then a long time ago, I had remembered, and some patrons had brought up as well, that she had a version that she had turned a couple of cats into monkeys. So I went through and kind of looked at her catalog and decided I was going to pick out one of her monkeys as a base because it was shaped very structurally correct, and then I would sort of paint over it from there to make it look more like Abu. I did ultimately end up changing fur shape, fur length, some of the facial structure, and some of the eyes just to make it look a little bit closer to Abu, and I think he came out so cute. I'm very excited, but I definitely wanted to give credit to the Kehlano, and I'll be linking them down below. I have used some of their other pets in the past in the Disney Save and definitely talked about them and cannot speak highly enough about all of the work that they do. It's truly incredible and something that I am personally just not capable of, so I have to give it up to people much more talented than me when it comes to creative pets. My patrons were super happy with how Abu turned out, which I was really happy about because I am always really torn about the process of turning like one animal into another. I don't think it translates flawlessly enough for like my little perfectionist brain, but I think I can settle on the fact that he came out good enough and he definitely screams Abu. Now moving on to the Sultan, who is the easiest character to make in today's video because he basically has no outfits other than his formal wear. He is seen probably wearing one other outfit, which is when he's stripped of his Sultan status and Jafar basically puts him down to his underwear. Can I just say that the copy and paste feature that has been added to the game is a lifesaver. I knew it was going to be a lifesaver when they showed it off in the Lovestruck showcase, but I just didn't even think for some reason about how I was going to be able to copy and paste over outfits for certain characters that really just only wear one thing. So we have characters like Jasmine where she has a lot of different intricate outfits and I can kind of play around with lots of colors and give her a variety of things to wear. But for the Sultan, he wears this white formal wear in most of the film, and even amongst like his different activities and things that he's going to be doing in the save file, you don't want him to be wearing pretty much anything else. So for those more simple characters where they just wear a lot of the same thing and I just needed to go through every outfit category and copy and paste that over, I don't have to do it manually anymore, and it saved me so much time. I'm so excited about this feature. It's definitely been long requested, but I cannot express enough how much time this is personally going to save me in the creation process of this save file. Even with Jafar, I ended up using it, and you'll see why in a little bit here. So for Jafar today, the last main character of the video, he is actually a vampire. I talked about this pretty extensively in the speed build, so if you want to get a little bit more info on why that decision was made, make sure you check that out as well. But basically what it comes down to is we don't have a ton of vampires in the save file. He makes a really good candidate because vampires allow you to do multi-forms, so I can do his secondary form as the genie look that he has later on in the movie, and then we get to add an extra vampire. Now, he won't be able to use magic, and he is a sorcerer, so that's a little bit of the give and take there, but I would argue that if you really buff out vampires, they can use a lot of similar-ish magic to the spellcasters in-game, to the point where it's representative enough of what Jafar is actually able to do in the animated movie anyway. You don't really see him doing like too much magic. He has a lot of items that he has enchanted or he maybe found or collected that actually give him his magic, and then I think he does a potion or two to enchant some things on his own. I did still put the cauldron in his bedroom. If he's not a spellcaster, he won't be able to fully utilize that, but it's there for set dressing. And then as a caveat, for those of you who were going to be disappointed by me not having the spellcaster Jafar, I decided I will just make a second version of him that goes up on the gallery for download, and then you can replace him in the household if you would rather have the spellcaster version. That's totally fine. We just have like an abundance of spellcasters in the save at this point, so putting in a different occult where this translation does sort of work makes a lot of sense to me. The other thing that you get with the spellcaster version is he will be able to have a familiar, which is Iago. And now a lot of you have been mentioning to me that maybe I should make Iago a human and have him be a part of the household, similar to how I did Mushu back when I did Mulan's household. I'm really torn about this because in my eyes, Iago is not an important character. I know that's going to be a controversial take, but I just don't see him as like a character that even really needs to be there. He is mostly comedic relief and in my opinion, mildly annoying. So I wasn't expecting the outpour of people being like, oh, just put him in as a human, like represent him that way. I just thought I could kind of get away with maybe no one wanting him because I didn't want him. So I'm still very much on the fence about that. I might be updating this household in the future to add a potential human version of Iago kind of as a servant for Jafar and bulk out this household a little bit more as well. well, but that's the reason that I just didn't do it initially. I'm kind of avoiding it, to be honest, and I do feel like certain characters can be cut and it's no harm, no foul, and I do feel like Iago is one of those characters, but I was surprised that a lot of people disagreed, so I'm mildly convinced. I just am not doing it in this particular video, but it might come up in the future. And of course, Jafar gets his genie form, which is like, it looks like him in terms of facial structure, but he's glowing red and super buff, so he ultimately just looks like a different person altogether in the secondary form. I gave him a lot of similar things that I did with my genie creative sim, so if you missed that, definitely check that out because it kind of like explains the process of geniifying a sim in the save file as well. And that would have been the end of the video, but I actually have a little bonus edition at the end here. So one of my lovely patrons put in a fan request for a extra bonus character to be added, not to this household in particular, but just from Aladdin, so it made sense to kind of throw him into today's video. And he is Aladdin's dad. You might have seen him from one of the Aladdin animated sequels. I don't really dabble in the sequel films as far as characters go for like my main households. I believe I have completely removed like any sequel characters, but something that I introduced a couple worlds ago is the idea of a bonus sim. So these are like extra sims that kind of just live on my gallery, and you can download them to add into the game as little additions so that you can tell more stories and there's more character opportunities. And like I said, one of my patrons decided to request this character, and I was excited to do this because he's really kind of an easy sim to do. I had already made Aladdin, which meant that the genetics part is mostly done, and as long as I did a good job on the base of Aladdin, I was going to be able to just draw everything right over from that Aladdin and use genetics in the game. And he started out as a really good base. I didn't have to change too many things, just maybe some facial little intricacies here and there, and he comes out really good. As far as clothing goes, whereas I've used a lot of For Rent, Jungle Adventure, and My Wedding Stories for the other Aladdin characters, this character is more representative of like desert travel. He has a lot of layered clothing. He wears a cape in the movie, and he also has a hood that he uses to cover his face. So he has more like layered vibes, and I decided to go with Star Wars ultimately. A lot of that clothing, obviously based off of like clothing that you would need for desert living, but it has that layered look and it has that nondescript sort of fantasy look. You can kind of piece some of those things together and still get these similar vibes. Ultimately, his outfit comes out looking very similar to the one from the movie without it being, you know, without having the cape and things that we would like to have. Hopefully they'll add things like that in the future, but I do not see that being the case if I'm honest with you guys. The last thing I want to mention is a little shout out to Raja that's going to be included in the household as well. This is also a pet done by the Kilano, and this is their tiger that they've completely painted. It's beautiful. I could not possibly do anything this intricate, so I had to pop their version in the game. I made some minor changes like eye color and changing the nose shape and some coloring there just to make it look more like Raja, but it is their pet ultimately. So again, credits to them down below. And that is going to be the end of today's Create Sim. Let me know what you thought of the Aladdin characters in the comment section down below, and if you'd like to support the Disney Save on Patreon, you can do so by clicking the link in my description box down below or the one at the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I will talk to you all in the next one.